The song hadn't even finished when she let go of my hand. Her fingers slipped out of mine so casually, so gently, that for a second I thought she was just adjusting her dress or brushing her hair back. But then she took one step backward, and another, until she disappeared behind the curtain near the kitchen exit of the banquet hall. I stood there like an idiot in the middle of the dance floor, surrounded by swaying couples and swaying wine glasses, the final notes of Moon River echoing in the rafters like a goodbye. That was the last time I saw Fern. Or the version of her I knew. It was her birthday. I'd rented the hall, paid for the string quartet, even printed out a custom menu with a fancy fake crest at the top, the House of Fern, like we were royalty. She used to love that kind of dramatic nonsense. We slow danced under gold lights and laughter. I whispered something dumb in her ear about growing old, and she actually giggled. I remember thinking, we're okay. After everything, after the distant silences, the canceled dinners, the therapy that lasted exactly 2 sessions, we were finally okay. She kissed me on the cheek, smiled, and said, "Don't move." Then she vanished. Here's where it gets weird. At first, nobody noticed. Not even me. I thought she just stepped away to freshen up or grab something. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. I asked her cousin if she'd seen her. Nothing. I checked the bathroom. Empty. Checked the kitchen. Staff only. Walked outside. The night air hit me like ice. Her car was still parked by the curb. Her purse was on the gift table. Her phone was inside her purse. Locked. Buzzing. I picked it up and saw a message. "Tell him I'm sorry." I had to. No name. No number. Just that. I didn't want to panic in front of everyone. So I made up a lie. Told the guests she got a migraine and needed to lie down in the back. I even brought out her birthday cake myself and sang with this robotic smile on my face while my insides were crumbling. People started leaving. The lights dimmed. Chairs scraped. I waited. And waited. At 2:13 a.m., when the janitor politely asked me if I was planning to sleep there, I finally drove home. Alone. That night, I left the door unlocked. I don't know why. I just knew. At 4:42 a.m., the floorboards creaked. I sat up, heart racing. She was standing in the hallway in that same champagne-colored dress, makeup untouched, barefoot. Her eyes were glossy. She didn't say a word. Just walked into the bedroom and pulled the covers over herself like she'd only gone out for a cigarette. I asked her where she'd gone. She stared at me and whispered, "Don't ruin this." Then she turned over and pretended to sleep. The next morning, she acted like everything was normal. Made coffee. Asked if I wanted eggs. Said she dreamed about waterfalls. When I asked again where she went, her face dropped for a millisecond, like her mask cracked, but then she smiled and said, "You're being dramatic, Byron." But here's the thing. She was wearing perfume she didn't own. Her hair was wet, but the shower was dry. And she had a bruise on her neck that she tried to hide under makeup. I didn't say a word, but something inside me fractured. Because whatever she left to do that night, she came back different. And I'm starting to think the version of her I married is gone. Or worse, replaced. I started sleeping with the door locked. I didn't tell her that, obviously. I just waited until she was in the shower, turned the deadbolt from the inside, and slid the nightstand in front of the door like I was some paranoid child hiding from monsters. But it wasn't the monsters under the bed I was scared of. It was her. I tried to convince myself it was stress, that I was overreacting, that maybe I needed therapy or a long vacation or some vitamin deficiency explained the hallucination of her standing in the hallway at nearly 5 in the morning like a mannequin wearing my wife's face. But then the little things started happening. I woke up one night and her side of the bed was cold. Not like she'd gotten up to pee or grab water. I mean cold like no one had been in it for hours. I got up, thinking maybe she was in the living room scrolling on her phone or watching one of those documentaries she always pretended to understand. She wasn't in the living room, or the kitchen, or the bathroom. I found her standing in the backyard barefoot, still in her nightgown, just staring up at the sky like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. When I opened the door and called out to her, she didn't move, didn't flinch, just said, "Almost done," in a voice that didn't sound like her. I swear to God, it didn't even sound female. It was flat, mechanical, like she was reading from a script she didn't understand. When she finally came back in, she didn't remember any of it. Said I was dreaming, that I probably had too much sugar before bed. She hates sugar. She hasn't touched it in years. She knows I know that. And she said it anyway. That's when I realized this wasn't about where she went the night of her birthday. This was about what came back in her place. It wore her face, knew her habits, quoted things only she would know. But it kept slipping, calling the cat Button when his name is Spoons, asking if I still worked at the bookstore, which I haven't for over 2 years, laughing at a memory of a road trip we never took. One night, I got brave, or maybe just desperate, and asked her point blank, "What's the last book you finished?" She paused for a long time, too long, then smiled and said, "The one with the lake." That was it. No author, no title, no plot, just The One with the Lake. Fern was a librarian. She could quote passages word for word. She'd ran about character arcs like she was giving a TED Talk. She would never forget a book. Ever. That same night, I went through her phone while she was in the shower. I know. Invasion of privacy. Sue me. I was looking for clues, for anything that could explain what the hell was happening. There were no new texts, no emails, no notifications, not even browsing history. Just a single file saved under the Notes app, titled Return. I opened it. All it said was, "Dig under the fig tree. Don't tell him." We don't have a fig tree. At least, that's what I thought. Until the next morning, when I walked around the side of the house and saw a tiny, sickly fig tree planted near the fence. One I swear hadn't been there a week ago. The soil around it looked fresh. Too fresh. I didn't dig. I still haven't. I want to pretend this is all just a nervous breakdown, or some elaborate prank, or maybe even a sleep disorder making me see things. But last night, I heard her whispering again in her sleep. At least, I thought she was asleep. I pressed my ear to the bedroom door and heard her say, in that same lifeless voice, "He suspects. We may need another one." I don't know who she was talking to. I don't know who we is. But I know one thing. The woman sleeping in my bed is not my wife. And I think she's planning something. Something that ends with me in the ground. It took me 3 more nights to dig. Not because I forgot. Not because I didn't care. Because I was afraid of what I might find. Every time I thought about grabbing the shovel, my mind would conjure something worse than the last. Bones, teeth, a body that looked like mine, or some box with my name carved into it in her handwriting. I know how that sounds. I do. But fear is a strange thing. It wraps logic in duct tape and buries it 6 feet under long before the shovel ever touches dirt. Still, I dug. I waited until she went out for groceries on Sunday. At least, that's what she told me. There was no car in the driveway when I looked out the window, so I grabbed the garden spade and gloves and made my way around the side of the house, to the fig tree that hadn't existed a week ago. The soil was darker than the rest of the yard, rich and wet like it had been recently turned. There were no weeds growing around it, no bugs either. That struck me as strange. Earth like that should be teeming with life. I started digging just off to the side of the tree, careful not to touch the roots. At first, it was just dirt, layer after layer, slow and silent, until I heard the clink. It wasn't metal. It was wood, splintered and soft. I dug faster now, hands shaking, mouth dry. After a few more frantic scrapes, I unearthed a small wooden box, about the size of a shoebox. No lock, no hinges, just nailed shut. There was something written on the top. Byron, my name, in her handwriting. I didn't even hesitate. I smashed it open on the concrete edge of the flower bed. The nails gave, the wood cracked, and the lid popped loose. Inside were 3 things. A Polaroid photo of the 2 of us, except I had no memory of it ever being taken. In the picture, I was asleep on the couch, and she was sitting behind me, staring at the camera with this blank, wide-eyed expression. Like she didn't blink. Like she was watching me, not posing with me. The second item was a folded napkin from the hollow, the jazz bar where we had her birthday dinner. It had a number written on it in black ink. No name, just a number I didn't recognize. And under it, the words, "Call if he wakes up different." And the third item, the third one, was a small white envelope. It had something inside that crinkled when I picked it up. I opened it slowly, heart pounding, and a single lock of hair fell out. Not hers. Mine. Tied with black thread. I don't remember the next few minutes. I must have stumbled back into the house in a daze, because when I came to, I was standing in the kitchen holding the envelope with dirt under my fingernails, the box still sitting outside by the bush like a coffin waiting for the rest of the body. She came home an hour later, empty-handed. No groceries. Just walked in like nothing had happened, kissed me on the cheek, and asked if I wanted to watch a movie. She was humming something. A tune I didn't recognize at first. Then it hit me. It was the same melody the quartet played at her birthday. The same song that was playing when she left me standing alone on the dance floor. She hadn't hummed in weeks. I watched her that night, like she was a stranger wearing Fern's skin. Every blink, every movement, every line she spoke from the movie we'd both seen 10 times, but that she now seemed to forget entirely. She laughed at the wrong parts, quoted scenes that didn't exist, called the main character Lance when his name was Eric. I knew then, without question, that something had come back wearing my wife's face, and it was slipping, like a glitch in a mask. But the worst part came after the movie, when I pretended to fall asleep on the couch. I cracked one eye open just a sliver, enough to see her standing across the room in the shadows. She wasn't watching me. She was whispering into the dark. No phone, no Bluetooth, just whispering to the corner of the room where the light didn't reach. I couldn't make out the words, but I saw her nod, and then she said clearly, in a voice that made my bones tighten, "Soon. He's softening." Later that night, I tried to call the number on the napkin. Blocked. Then I called it again from a different phone. It rang twice. Then a voice answered. Not Fern. Not even close. A man, older, deep and rough, like gravel. He didn't say hello. He said, "Where did you find the box?" I froze. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. He repeated, slower. "Where did you find it?" I hung up. 5 seconds later, my phone buzzed. A new message. No contact. Just words. "If you want to survive the week, leave the house by Tuesday." Tuesday came, and I didn't leave. Maybe that was stupid. Maybe that message should have been enough. But you have to understand, I've lived in this house for 9 years. I proposed to Fern in the kitchen while she was cooking lentil soup. I built the stupid bookshelf in the living room with uneven legs. We buried our first cat under the oak tree in the front yard. Everything I am is wrapped into the drywall and floorboards of this place. Leaving it behind because of some cryptic warning from a stranger felt like admitting something irreversible, that she had won, and I had lost, and nothing was ever coming back. So instead, I did what I always do. I stayed, and I watched. Fern, if I can even call her that anymore, started acting stranger by the hour. Not dramatically, not in a horror movie way. That's what made it worse. It was subtle. 1,000 tiny things that felt like someone trying to imitate a person they didn't quite understand. She started writing in a notebook I'd never seen before. Always in the same spot, the dining room table, around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, after her second cup of coffee. She'd scribble furiously for 15 minutes, then slide the notebook into the same drawer, under the takeout menus, and go on with her day like nothing happened. I waited until she left for yoga, something she's never once mentioned in 6 years, and opened the drawer. The notebook was filled with symbols. Not letters, not words, just rows and rows of circles, slashes, triangles, and what looked like insect legs. No repetition, no clear pattern, just chaos, like someone trying to write a language that wasn't meant to be spoken aloud. In the middle of page 13, there was a single English phrase written in perfect block letters. "I will forget him if he remembers me." I flipped the pages faster. More symbols, more frantic scrawling. The margins were stained with something dark, something sticky. The edges were curled like they'd been exposed to fire or water. But there were no burn marks, no smell, just deterioration, like the notebook was rotting from the inside out. And then I turned to the last page. One word, written over and over again in red ink. Byron, at least 20 times. Some of them scratched so deeply into the paper that the pen had torn clean through. I slammed it shut and shoved it back into the drawer just as I heard the front door open. She walked in, calm as ever, mat under her arm, hair tied up. She smiled and kissed me on the cheek, said the class was relaxing. I asked if she'd ever been to that studio before. She said yes. I asked if she remembered the instructor's name. She blinked, then smiled wider and said, "It doesn't matter." I didn't sleep that night. Around 3 a.m., I heard footsteps upstairs. Not walking, not pacing, running. But there are only 2 of us in this house. I got up and grabbed the baseball bat from under the bed, heart pounding. I crept into the hallway, every floorboard screaming betrayal with each step. The noise had stopped. Silence now. Just the faint hum of the fridge downstairs and the thrum of blood in my ears. I opened the guest room door slowly. Empty. Nothing but dust and boxes. Then I saw it. Something written on the inside of the door. in pencil so faint I almost missed it. Do not let her speak when it's dark. I backed away, slowly, carefully, closing the door without a sound. The next morning, Fern was already in the kitchen, cooking breakfast. Eggs, toast, a side of avocado. She hates avocado. She once called it green phlegm at a brunch with friends and nearly made the waitress cry from laughter. But here she was, slicing it perfectly and plating it like a food blogger. I sat down at the table. She smiled. I thought we'd try something new today. I didn't eat. Instead, I asked, "Do you remember what you said when I proposed?" She didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. She smiled and said, "You didn't propose." I did. My stomach flipped. That's not how it happened. She knows that. I didn't even correct her. I just nodded and stared at my plate while she hummed that birthday song again under her breath. I called the number again later that day. The same one from the napkin. This time, it didn't ring. This time, the line connected instantly. And the voice on the other end said something I will never forget. "You've already left once. Don't you remember?" I tried to ask what he meant, but the line went dead. I checked the call log. No call had been placed. My phone didn't even register an outgoing number. There's something wrong with the house. Or maybe something wrong with time inside the house. Every clock is off by a different number of minutes. Sometimes they spin. Sometimes the second hand just stops. I looked into the mirror in the hallway yesterday, and for a split second, I was sure my reflection blinked before I did. And now, every night, I wake up with dirt on my hands. Every night. Even when I go to sleep with gloves on. Even when I shower before bed. Even when I lock my hands inside the nightstand drawer. Every night. Dirt. Under my fingernails. The smell was what finally did it. Not the whispers. Not the notebook. Not the fig tree or the strange call logs, or even the fact that my wife now sometimes blinked out of sync with herself. It was the smell. It started on Wednesday. Faint at first. Just a trace of something musty, earthy, almost like mildew. I figured maybe there was a leak somewhere in the attic. Maybe a squirrel died in the insulation. The kind of normal problems homeowners talk about on forums or fix-it subreddits. But this wasn't that. Because the smell moved. One day it was in the hallway. The next, in the bathroom. Then under the sink. Then, on Thursday night, I smelled it on her. She climbed into bed with wet hair again, claiming she'd taken a bath. But the tub was dry. Not just empty, bone dry. No steam. No damp towel. She pulled the blanket over her like everything was fine, her back to me, humming something I couldn't place. That same scent clung to her skin. Soil, rot, copper. She whispered something into the pillow that night. I couldn't make it out at first. I leaned in slowly, breath held. He's getting close to the door. I froze. Not a door. The door. The next morning, I went into the attic. Now, let me be clear. I've been in our attic maybe 3 times in 9 years. It's the usual mess. Old holiday boxes, dusty lamps, boxes labeled Fern's college crap. But this time, something was different. The temperature was wrong. It was warmer than it should have been, like a body had been breathing in there all night. And the insulation in the far left corner had been ripped away. Not clawed, not chewed, peeled back carefully, like someone had surgically exposed that section of wall. Behind it, nestled between beams, was a hatch. A narrow wooden square I swear wasn't there before. No knob, no handle, just a little indentation, like a fingerprint pressed into the wood. And carved into it, barely visible unless you were right up close, was a phrase. I left because I had to. If I stayed, you wouldn't exist. My blood turned to ice. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. I backed out of the attic and slammed the door shut, heart slamming in my chest. I stood there for almost 10 minutes trying to make sense of what I'd seen, until I realized something was off. There was a sound, a recording, coming from downstairs. I crept down slowly, one step at a time, the creaking boards loud enough to make my skin crawl. The sound got clearer as I descended. It was my voice, not someone imitating me, not a distorted echo. It was me, speaking into some kind of recorder, narrating my own confusion, fear, frustration. Talking about her, the fig tree, the notebook, the box, the dirt. Word for word, the exact thoughts in my head. I followed the sound to the study. The door was cracked open. Inside, the tape recorder sat on the desk, spinning. No one was there. No sign of how it had been turned on. But the last 10 seconds chilled me more than anything else in this nightmare. My voice on the tape said, "And if you're hearing this, I'm already gone. The one you're looking at now isn't me. It's what's left behind. Don't trust it. Burn it. Before it speaks your name. I slammed the recorder off. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Not heavy, not fast. Soft, careful, barefoot. When I turned around, she was standing there. No emotion, just stillness. She tilted her head slightly, and in the most ordinary voice in the world, said, "Did you go into the attic?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. She smiled slowly. "Don't worry. That version of you always does." Then she walked past me and turned off the lights. I should have left it alone. Whatever instincts I had left were screaming at me to stay away, to board up the attic, to burn the house down if I had to. But the longer I waited, the more I felt it, something under the surface of my skin, an itching curiosity that didn't feel like mine. Like the thought to open the hatch wasn't coming from me anymore. Like it was being fed into me slowly, one poisoned whisper at a time. By Thursday, I stopped sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the hatch. But not the one in the attic, not exactly. It kept changing in the dreams. Some nights it was underwater, some nights in the center of a forest I'd never been to. Once even in the trunk of a car that was burning from the inside out. But it was always there, always waiting, and always whispering my name. I finally caved around 3:12 a.m. It was raining, light but steady, the kind of soft rain that makes the world feel smaller. Fern was asleep, or pretending to be. She'd taken to sleeping with her eyes slightly open, and I didn't have the courage to check if she was blinking. I took the crowbar from the garage and a flashlight from the drawer. When I pulled the attic door open, the smell hit me again. Stronger this time. Not just mildew. Something older. Like wet paper left to rot in a sealed room. I climbed the ladder slowly, flashlight trembling in my grip. Each creak of the steps sounded like a countdown. When I reached the top, I didn't hesitate. I crossed the attic directly to the hatch and pressed my fingers into the little indentation. It was warm. That was the first shock. What isn't supposed to be warm? The hatch clicked open without resistance. No lock. No resistance. It just wanted to open. I pulled it upward and aimed my flashlight down. There was a tunnel. A perfectly square one. About 4 feet wide, carved directly between the walls, extending downward. Not straight down, but at an angle. The wood was smooth. Too smooth. Like it had been polished. There were markings along the inside. Vertical slashes and symbols like the ones in her notebook. But now I could see they weren't random. They were counting something. Measuring. And they ended 32 marks down with a word I hadn't seen before. Byron, 7. My name. With a dash and a number. Like I was version 7 of something. I lowered myself in, one leg at a time, until I was inside. The walls were narrow, almost claustrophobic, but the tunnel didn't feel dead. It breathed. Air moved through it in slow pulses, like lungs inhaling behind the wood. I walked. I don't know how long. There was no sense of time. The walls never changed. No forks. No doors. Just a straight path that hummed low and constant, like electricity running through buried wires. Then the sound started. My voice. Not a recording. Not a memory. My actual voice. Arguing, begging, panicking. And then another voice. Her voice. But not the way Fern speaks now. No, this was sharper. Crueler. Detached. I heard it say, "You weren't meant to see this one." I ran. I don't even remember turning. The tunnel twisted behind me like it had grown new branches, but I didn't stop. I ran with the flashlight flailing in my hand, breath burning, hard in my throat, until I slammed into something solid, wood. The back of the hatch. But when I pushed it open, I didn't come out in the attic. I came out in the hallway. Of my house. Except, it wasn't quite right. The photos on the walls were wrong. Not completely, just slightly. In one, Fern was smiling with someone who looked like me, but taller, thinner, with a sharper jawline. The frame was crooked. The walls were the wrong color. The light switch had 3 toggles instead of 2. I walked into the living room. She was there, reading a book I'd never seen, curled on the couch, sipping from a mug. She looked up at me and smiled, like I'd just come back from the store. "Finally," she said. This one took longer than the others. I didn't answer. My eyes drifted to the wall behind her. More photos. All of me. Different versions. Different facial hair. Different clothes. But always me. Always next to her. And one was crossed out. A red X over the face. My face. She followed my gaze and stood up. "You should rest," she said. "You'll need your strength when the merging starts." I backed away. My legs didn't want to move, but I forced them. I want to go home, I muttered, barely recognizing my own voice. She tilted her head. You are home, Byron. Then, without blinking, she added, this time, don't fight it. There's a basement now. I swear it didn't exist before. Our house was a one-story ranch. No crawl space, no cellar. When we bought it, the realtor even joked that the water table made a basement impossible. But this morning, after I woke up in the not-quite-right hallway with the wrong wedding photos and the woman who wasn't quite Fern humming that terrible tune again, I noticed the change. There was a door under the stairs. It wasn't there yesterday. I would have seen it. I walk past that spot every day to get to the kitchen. But now it's there. White. Smooth. With a black iron handle, cold to the touch. I opened it. Concrete steps spiraled downward into darkness. No light switch. No handrail. Just a scent. Faint, metallic, earthy. I held my breath and descended slowly, using the flashlight app on my phone, though the screen kept flickering as if the air down there resented the light. At the bottom, the room opened into something massive. Too massive. Bigger than the footprint of our entire house. The walls weren't brick or stone. They were made of something that looked like dark glass, slightly reflective but not quite a mirror. The floor was tiled with old linoleum that crunched under my feet like dry leaves. And the ceiling was covered in writing. Thousands of names. I found mine 7 times. Byron // Byron 2 / Byron 3 / Byron // B re0 n / Byron 7. And at the end of the farthest line, Byron 8. I didn't want to look at the walls, but I did. They weren't just reflective. They showed movement. Shadows. Figures. Each pane showed a version of me. One bleeding, one screaming, one sleeping peacefully with something standing just outside the frame. One was curled in a ball whispering apologies to no one. I reached out and touched one of the walls, just for a second, and instantly recoiled. My arm felt cold. Not like ice, like vacuum. Like it had been dipped in something that had no temperature at all. I looked at my fingers and the tips were pale, almost gray. And then I heard it. Shuffling. Movement. A dragging sound, like cloth across linoleum. I turned, and there they were. 6 men. All versions of me. Some older. Some thinner. One was badly burned. Another had eyes that were clouded over like old milk. But they were all me, every last one of them. They stood in a loose semicircle, and for a moment, I thought they were mannequins or projections. But then one of them stepped forward. Byron 3. I don't know how I knew that. I just did. He looked at me with tired, sunken eyes and said, "You were supposed to be better than us." I opened my mouth, but no words came out. "You were the only one who made it to the hatch without turning around," said another. Byron 6, maybe. "She thought you might be stable enough." Stable enough for what? I finally asked. The one in the center, the burned one, took a step forward. To merge. "She's running out of room." Before I could respond, a sound echoed from above, a deep, throaty knock 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 that rattled the floor. The lights overhead, if you could call them that, pulsed red once. Then the voices all spoke at once, in perfect unison. "She's coming." I backed toward the stairs, but they were gone. The doorway I came through was no longer there. Just another black pane of that awful glass. And in its reflection, I saw myself. Not moving, not breathing, just standing with empty sockets where my eyes should have been. I screamed. Then I heard her voice behind me. "You're the last one, Byron." I turned. It was Fern, or what was left of her. Her face shimmered at the edges, like heat on pavement. Her smile was wider now. Too wide. Her eyes were wrong. Not black, not white, but something in between. Like cracked porcelain. She walked slowly, like a shadow learning to move through flesh, and every step echoed as if the walls were breathing with her. "You all thought you were the original," she whispered, circling me. "But every version thinks that. Every Byron tells himself the same story, about the party, the missing wife, the phone calls, the fig tree. We give you the same narrative so you feel unique." I felt dizzy. "I remember all of it," I said, trying to anchor myself. "I remember what happened. I know who I am." She leaned in close, lips near my ear. "No," she whispered. "You remember what I gave you." She placed her hand on my chest. It burned. My legs buckled. The other Byrons watched in silence. No expression, no pity. You're Byron 8. The cleanest one. The quietest. The least resistant. And that's why you'll make a perfect core. I collapsed. The walls began to hum. Red symbols lit up around me on the floor. Those same unreadable glyphs from the notebook and the hatch. I felt them digging into my mind, peeling back the layers of memory like old wallpaper. I screamed again, not because I was afraid of dying, but because, for 1 second, I remembered being on the other side of this, watching another version fall, speaking the same words, and smiling. The moment she touched my chest, the world fractured. I saw it, not like a dream, but like being dragged across dimensions at once. 1,000 rooms, 1,000 mirrors, each one reflecting a different version of myself. Some screaming, some crumbling, some simply sitting in a chair, staring blankly at a wall, as if they'd given up fighting long ago. I wasn't in the basement anymore, or the hallway, or the hatch. I was nowhere, and everywhere, suspended in something that felt like static and grief and memory. She stood at the center of it all, not Fern, the thing that wore her face, no longer pretending. Its body shimmered like water held in the shape of a person. Its voice came from every angle at once. You were made to dissolve, it said, like all the others, to be absorbed, recycled, eaten. That is your design. But then something strange happened. Another voice cut through the noise. Mine, not the one inside my head, not one of the echoes. Me, the real me, the version that had stopped dancing on the night of her birthday, the one that had waited too long for her to return, the one that stayed, the one that suffered. You made a mistake, I said, stepping forward, even as the floor beneath me warped like melting glass. You shouldn't have let me remember. The creature tilted its head, expression flickering for just a moment. Confused, curious. And that's when I saw the break in the loop. A flicker, a gap in the story, a place I hadn't been yet, a door I hadn't tried. I ran. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to keep moving. The reality around me twisted and groaned, trying to fold in on itself, but something in me, something older, more stubborn, kept pushing forward. And then suddenly, light, bright, blinding, real light. I burst through it like surfacing from a long, cold dive. I gasped for air and collapsed to my knees. I was in my living room, the real one. Photos back to normal. The walls the right color. No fig tree outside. No notebook in the drawer. No hatch in the attic. And she was there. Fern, sleeping peacefully on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, the soft sound of an old jazz record playing in the background. I rushed to her side, trembling. She stirred as I touched her shoulder, blinking awake. Her eyes, her true eyes, met mine. Byron, she said groggily. You okay? I couldn't answer. I was crying, laughing, broken and whole at the same time. She touched my face gently. Did you have a nightmare? I nodded. Then she smiled and kissed my forehead. You're here now? You're safe. And somehow, I believed her. That was 6 weeks ago. Nothing strange has happened since. The clocks are normal. The attic is just insulation and cobwebs. The fig tree never existed. I even dug up the yard to be sure. Nothing but soil and worms. Fern is back to herself. No cold hands. No humming. No distant stare. Just her. The woman I fell in love with. Sometimes I catch her looking at me when she thinks I'm not watching, like she knows I went somewhere I wasn't supposed to and barely made it back. But she never asks. And I never bring it up. Some things are better left behind the door. I don't know what version I am anymore. Maybe I'm Byron 1. Maybe I'm Byron 800. Maybe it doesn't matter. Because this version, this one survived. This one made it out. And this one gets to keep the woman he loves. For good.